Hey everybody, and welcome back for another deep dive.
I'm excited to be here.
Me too. I always love getting to chat with you, and I think today's topic is going to be a real head scratcher.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about justice.
Big topic.
Huge, huge topic. And we're going to be looking at this through the lens of C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity.
Oh, C.S. Lewis, he's always a good one to grapple with.
He really is.
Lots of challenging ideas.
But that's why we love him, right?
Exactly. He makes us think.
So justice, where do we even begin?
Well, maybe we should start with how C.S. Lewis approaches it.
Yeah, how does he even frame this whole concept of justice?
Well, one of the first things he does is he talks about this idea of the law of human nature.
Law of human nature.
Yeah, and he compares it to something like the law of gravity.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, he's basically saying that just like there are these natural laws that govern the physical world.
Like things fall down.
Exactly, right? There are also laws that govern human behavior.
Interesting. So he's saying there's this kind of built-in sense of right and wrong that we all have.
That's exactly it. It's not like someone has to teach us that stealing is bad or that helping someone in need is good.
It just kind of feels right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's ingrained in us somehow.
Yeah, and Lewis calls this inside information.
Inside information.
Yeah, it's not like observing something out in the world like a tree or a rock.
It's something we experience internally.
Exactly. It's this inner compass we all seem to carry around.
So he's saying this moral law, this sense of justice, isn't just some arbitrary set of rules.
It's something deeper than that. It points to something beyond ourselves.
A source of goodness and fairness.
Right. And this is a key point, I think, in understanding Lewis's approach to justice.
Okay, so we've got this moral law, this innate sense of right and wrong.
But then Lewis brings up this whole idea of creative evolution and how that fits into the picture.
Creative evolution. I've heard that term thrown around, but what did Lewis actually think about it?
Well, he was a little wary of it, to be honest.
Wary.
Yeah, he didn't like the idea of using it to kind of explain away God or suggest that we humans can just manipulate God for our own purposes.
Like a tame God we could switch on and off as needed.
Exactly.
That's pretty insightful, though. I mean, we do tend to try to fit God into our own little boxes sometimes.
We do, don't we? And Lewis was pushing back against that.
So he's saying we can't just cherry pick the parts of God we like and ignore the rest.
Absolutely. And he goes even further, arguing that if humanity's on the wrong path, morally speaking, progress doesn't mean blindly moving forward.
Interesting.
It means turning back, finding the right way.
Even if it's difficult?
Even if it's hard, yeah.
Wow. That's a tough one to swallow. We like to think we're always moving forward.
Right, always progressing.
But sometimes the best way forward is to go back,
reassess, figure out where we went wrong.
And correct course, exactly.
So this moral law points to something bigger than ourselves, a source of goodness, of justice. But what about the flip side of that?
The flip side? Yeah, what about evil? Where does that fit into all of this?
That's a great question. And it's where Lewis gets really fascinating, I think.
Okay, lay it on me.
So he compares Christianity to dualism, right?
Dualism, that's the idea that there are two equal forces.
Good and evil, yeah.
Battling it out.
Yeah.
Like a cosmic tug of war.
Right. But Christianity presents a different perspective. It says that evil isn't this original force.
It's not like an equal opposite to good?
No, it's more like a distortion.
Okay.
A parasite on goodness.
A parasite. That's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, and he even uses this really powerful phrase, fallen angel.
Fallen angel. That's so vivid.
Yeah, it suggests that evil isn't inherently powerful.
It's a corruption of something that was originally good.
That's it, like a beautiful tapestry that's been vandalized.
I love that analogy.
The beauty's still there, but it's been marred.
Twisted.
Yeah, exactly. And this leads us to the question of free will.
Ah, free will, the age-old debate.
Right. And Lewis acknowledges that free will, while essential for love and goodness, it also opens the door to evil.
It's like a double-edged sword, I guess.
Yeah, he's saying that the greater the capacity for good, the greater the capacity for evil as well.
He makes this comparison to creating something beautiful.
Right.
The finer the material,
the greater the potential for both beauty and damage.
So like a delicate piece of art, it can be breathtaking.
But also easily shattered.
Exactly.
And this has some pretty profound implications for how we understand justice, right?
Absolutely. Because if we have free will...
and we're responsible for our choices.
For the consequences of those choices.
We can't just blame our bad behavior on our rotten stuff, as Lewis puts it.
So no more, oh, it's not my fault, I was born this way, excuses.
Nope. We have to own up to the choices we make, even the seemingly small ones.
The ones that might seem insignificant in the moment.
But they all add up. They shape our character.
Determine the kind of people we become.
And ultimately, they contribute to either the establishment or the erosion of true justice in the world.
So we've got this moral law, this sense of justice.
And we've got this free will that can be used for good or evil.
But where does Christ fit into all of this? I mean, we are talking about mere Christianity here.
Good point. And Lewis doesn't shy away from tackling the significance of Christ.
No, he dives right in.
Yeah. He says that understanding the mechanics of Christ's death might be challenging.
Okay.
But accepting its power to set things right between humanity and God, that's key.
It's like a cosmic reset button.
In a way, yes. He compares it to eating a nourishing meal.
Eating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't need to understand every single detail of digestion.
To know that eating is good for us.
Exactly. We trust the process even if we don't fully grasp all the intricacies.
So we can trust the process of faith even if we don't fully comprehend all the theological nuances.
That's a big part of Lewis's message, I think. Trusting that it works even if we don't fully understand how.
Okay, so how does this idea of Christ setting things right play out in our everyday lives?
Well, this is where Lewis brings in the concept of virtue.
Virtue, okay.
And specifically, he focuses on the 4 cardinal virtues.
Yes. Prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude.
You got it. But he points out that their meanings have gotten a bit twisted over time.
Oh, I can see that. Like temperance today, it's often associated with things like abstaining from alcohol.
Yeah, like being a teetotaler.
But Lewis reminds us that temperance, in its original sense,
meant moderation in all pleasures.
Not just abstaining from certain things.
It's about finding that balance, that sweet spot.
Where our desires don't control us.
Exactly.
So it's less about saying no to everything.
Right.
More about being mindful of our choices.
And making sure we're not letting our desires run wild.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it's a critical part of living a just life, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Justice isn't just about following rules.
It's about cultivating that sense of balance and fairness within ourselves.
Which then spills out into our interactions with others.
That's beautiful. Okay, but what about chastity? That one always seems to spark a lot of debate.
It does, especially today. But Lewis doesn't shy away from it.
So what did he have to say about it?
Well, he acknowledged that it's a challenging virtue.
One that often clashes with modern views on sexuality.
For sure. And he wasn't afraid to tackle the tough questions.
Like what?
Well, he pointed out what he saw as an excess of sexual appetite compared to its primary biological purpose, which is procreation.
Okay.
He also talked about the prevalence of sexual perversions.
Suggesting that they highlight how distorted our understanding of sexuality has become.
Exactly. He even addressed the whole sexual starvation theory.
The idea that suppressing sexual desires is harmful.
Right. He argued that increased access to contraception and changing social norms haven't really supported that idea.
So he's saying that repressing our sexuality doesn't necessarily lead to negative consequences.
That's his argument, yeah.
But his central point, I think, is that the Christian view on sexuality.
It's not about shame or repression.
It's about recognizing that the instinct has become distorted.
And that indulging every sexual impulse can lead to negative consequences.
For individuals and for society as a whole.
Exactly.
So he's not saying we should just shut down our sexuality.
No, not at all.
But rather that we should approach it with a sense of wisdom and self-control.
Aligning our desires with what's truly good for us.
Both physically and spiritually.
You got it. And that ties back to the whole concept of justice.
Because if we're not in control of our desires,
they can lead us to act unjustly.
To harm ourselves and others.
Exactly.
So it's not just about following rules for the sake of following rules.
It's about understanding how our choices, our desires, and our actions
all contribute to creating a more just and harmonious world.
That's beautifully put, I think.
And speaking of harmony, I think it's time to delve into Lewis's thoughts on marriage.
Oh yeah, marriage. This is where his analogy of a lock and key comes into play.
A lock and key? What's he getting at with that?
Well, he's talking about how marriage, in the Christian sense, is about a total union.
Not just the physical aspect of the relationship.
Right, it goes way beyond that.
Yeah.
He argues that isolating the sexual union from the other forms of connection
creates a kind of monstrosity, to use his word.
He does, and this leads to the Christian perspective on divorce as a truly drastic measure.
A last resort.
Yeah, he compares it to cutting up a living body.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
It is. It's a stark contrast to the modern view of divorce as a relatively simple readjustment.
Right, like it's just a minor inconvenience.
Yeah, just switch things up a bit. But Lewis is saying it's much more serious than that.
It's about understanding that our actions don't just affect us as individuals.
They ripple outwards,
impacting those around us, even society as a whole.
That's it.
So it's not just about finding yourself and pursuing your own happiness, regardless of the cost to others.
No, it's about recognizing that we're all interconnected,
that our choices have consequences
that extend far beyond our own immediate desires.
That seems like a pretty mature and responsible way to approach life.
I think so too.
And that sense of responsibility, that understanding of our interconnectedness.
It's crucial for building a truly just society.
This is all pretty heavy stuff. But Lewis never shies away from the tough questions, does he?
Never. He dives right in.
And speaking of tough questions, what about pride?
Pride?
He seems to argue that pride is the ultimate obstacle to knowing God.
He does. Why is that?
Well, Lewis believed that recognizing our own insignificance in comparison to God
is essential for truly knowing him.
He said that a proud person can't truly know God.
Because pride prevents us from looking up and acknowledging something greater than ourselves.
He even said the real test of being in the presence of God is that you either forget about yourself altogether or see yourself as a small, dirty object.
Wow, that's pretty humbling.
It is. We're often so focused on our own importance,
our own achievements,
that we forget there's something much bigger at play.
It's only when we humble ourselves, acknowledge our limitations,
that we can truly open ourselves to the divine.
It's about recognizing that true strength often lies in admitting our weakness.
Our need for something beyond ourselves.
Beautifully said.
So if pride is the obstacle, what's the antidote?
What does Lewis say about cultivating humility and connecting with God?
I am all ears.
Well, that's where the concept of charity comes in.
Charity. But charity doesn't just mean giving money to charity, as it's often understood today, right?
You're exactly right. It's a much bigger, more powerful concept.
It's about love, isn't it? But not just any kind of love.
No, it's love in the Christian sense. Love as an act of will, a choice we make.
Rather than just a fleeting feeling.
Exactly.
So it's about choosing to love.
Even when we don't necessarily feel it.
And Lewis gives some pretty practical advice on how to cultivate this kind of love. He says we should act as if we love our neighbor.
Even when we don't naturally feel warm and fuzzy towards them.
Fake it till you make it.
You could say that. He even gives this great quote.
Oh, I love his quotes.
Love your neighbor. Act as if you did. As soon as we do this, we find one of the great secrets. When you are behaving as if you love someone, you will presently come to love him.
It's about changing our actions to influence our feelings.
Rather than waiting for our feelings to dictate our actions.
That's such a powerful concept. It's so easy to get stuck in that I'll be kind when I feel like it mindset.
It is, but Lewis is suggesting that kindness, like any virtue, can be cultivated through practice.
Even if it feels a little forced at first.
Right, like exercising a muscle.
Okay, so we've talked about pride and charity.
Big topics.
Which are huge parts of living a just life. But what about the nature of God himself? How does Lewis tackle the mystery of the Trinity?
Oh, the Trinity, that's a tough one.
It is. But Lewis, as always, has some fascinating insights. He uses some creative analogies to try and help us wrap our minds around this concept of three personal beings in one.
Right. He compares the Trinity to the dimensions of space, for example.
Dimensions of space.
Yeah. Think about a cube.
A cube.
It has 6 squares, right?
6 squares, yeah.
But it remains a single cube.
Okay, I'm starting to see where he's going with this.
He's trying to help us grasp this mind-boggling idea of 3 in 1. It's definitely a concept that stretches our understanding of what it means to be a person, isn't it?
Absolutely. It challenges our limited human categories.
Lewis acknowledges that it's beyond our ability to fully comprehend.
But he offers a glimpse into the super-personal nature of God.
A being that transcends our limited human understanding.
It's like we need to expand our vocabulary, our very way of thinking, to even begin to approach the mystery of God.
I think that's a great way to put it.
And then he goes on to introduce this idea of God existing outside of time, right?
Right. He uses the example of an author writing a novel
to illustrate how God experiences all moments as the present.
Exactly. For God, there's no past, present, or future as we understand it.
He's outside of time, experiencing all of time simultaneously.
That's a total mind bender, isn't it?
It is. It challenges our whole linear understanding of time.
It does. And it also helps to resolve some apparent contradictions in Christian beliefs.
Like what?
Well, for example, how can an eternal God
also become a man experiencing human limitations?
That's a great question. How does this concept shift your understanding of prayer and God's interaction with humanity?
That is a good question. If God isn't bound by time as we understand it,
Does that mean he's always present, always listening, regardless of when or where we pray?
I think that's a possibility worth contemplating.
It definitely opens up a whole new dimension to our understanding of God's relationship with humanity. Lewis suggests that Christ becoming man
Okay.
wasn't about God choosing one specific tin soldier, to use his analogy,
Yeah.
but rather about a transformative element changing the entire glass of water.
So it wasn't just about Jesus' individual life,
But about a change that impacted all of humanity.
past, present, and future.
Exactly. Lewis argues that Christ's incarnation affects everyone.
Even those who lived before him or never knew him.
It's a universal transformation, a shift in the very fabric of human existence.
Wow, that's a powerful thought. It challenges the idea that only those who explicitly believe in Christ are impacted by his life and teachings.
It does. It really expands the scope of his influence.
So, if Christ's coming was this universal game changer, how does Lewis explain the concept of becoming a son of God?
Another great question, and that's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive.
Can't wait. Stay tuned, everyone.
See you next time. Welcome back. We're continuing our deep dive into justice with C.S. Lewis as our guide.
Last time we were talking about this idea of sons of God, and I have to admit I'm still a bit fuzzy on what that actually means.
Yeah, it's a concept that takes some unpacking.
For sure. But before we get too deep into that, I wanted to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the whole idea of faith.
Faith, the cornerstone of Christianity.
Right. But I have to admit, I've always struggled a bit with how simply believing something can be morally good.
Yeah, that can seem a bit counterintuitive.
It feels like morality should be about actions, not just thoughts.
Lewis wrestled with that too.
He did.
Oh, yeah. He even wondered how accepting or rejecting a set of statements could be a matter of morality. It's not like you're doing anything, right?
Right, it's just an idea in your head.
But Lewis came to understand that faith, in its deeper sense, goes way beyond just intellectual agreement.
So it's not just about believing certain things are true, it's about
putting those beliefs into action, about living them out.
walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. Lewis argues that faith, at its core, is a kind of trust.
Trust.
Yeah, like trusting a friend or a guide. It's a willingness to bet your life on the truth of what you believe.
Whoa, bet your life. That's a pretty big gamble.
It is. But that's the kind of commitment Lewis is talking about. It's about stepping out in obedience, even when you don't have all the answers.
So it's about choosing to live as if what you believe is true, even if you haven't got it all figured out.
Precisely. It's like trusting the map, even if you haven't explored the entire territory.
I love that analogy. It's about having enough faith to embark on the journey, knowing that you'll figure things out along the way.
And Lewis emphasizes that this kind of faith isn't blind. It's not about ignoring reason or evidence.
So it's not about checking your brain at the door.
Not at all. It's about recognizing that our human understanding has limits.
We don't know everything.
Right. And sometimes we need to act on what we believe, even when we don't fully grasp it.
It's about taking that leap of faith, that moment when you say, okay, I'm going for it, even if I don't have all the answers right now.
And remember, Lewis points out that this map of Christian theology isn't just some random set of ideas. It's based on the experiences of countless people who have actually walked the path, who've encountered God in a real transformative way. Their lives are like guideposts along the way, showing us what's possible.
So it's not just a bunch of abstract theories. It's a lived experience, a journey that's been tested and proven over centuries.
Exactly. And Lewis is saying that if we want to reach that destination, if we want to experience the fullness of life that Christ offers, we need to trust the map. We need to put those teachings into practice, to live as if they're true, even when we don't fully understand them. It's in the doing, the living, that our understanding deepens and true justice starts to take root in our lives.
Okay, so we're starting to see how faith and action go hand in hand. But let's go back to that idea of becoming a son of God. I'm still trying to wrap my head around what that really means.
Yeah, it's a profound concept. But Lewis offers some helpful insights. He distinguishes between being made and being begotten. God begets God, he says, just like humans beget humans.
So we're not talking about being created in the same way that God created the universe. It's a different kind of relationship altogether.
Exactly. Lewis argues that while humans are made in the image of God, they don't naturally possess the same kind of life that God has. He calls it Zoe life.
Zoe life, what's that?
It's this Greek word that means something more like abundant life. It's a spiritual life that's eternal and self-sustaining. in contrast to bios life, which is the kind of life we experience in the natural world.
So bios life is temporary, Zoe life is eternal.
You got it.
So to become a son of God means to tap into this Zoe life, this divine life that's beyond our normal human experience, like leveling up our existence.
That's a great way to put it. And Lewis says that the hardest part, the transformation from creature to son, has already been accomplished for us through Christ. He's opened the door for us to participate in this divine life. He even calls it a universal good infection.
A good infection? That sounds a bit strange.
It does, doesn't it? But think about it like this. We can be infected with this incredible Zoe life just by being around Christ, by opening ourselves up to his influence.
It's like catching a good bug instead of a bad one. And the best part, it's not something we have to earn or achieve through our own efforts. It's a gift, freely given.
That's the radical beauty of Christianity. It flips the script. It's not about striving to reach God through our own efforts, but about accepting a gift we could never earn on our own. It's about surrendering to a power greater than ourselves and allowing it to transform us from the inside out.
That's a powerful thought. It takes a lot of humility to admit that we can't do it on our own, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Humility is key. It's about acknowledging that we're not the center of the universe, that there's something much bigger at play. And that realization, Lewis argues, can be both incredibly liberating and totally terrifying.
Liberating because we're freed from the burden of trying to be our own saviors.
Right.
But terrifying because it means facing our own limitations, our need for something beyond ourselves.
You nailed it. And that's where the rubber meets the road, where we move from a theoretical understanding of grace and surrender to actually living it out. It's about putting those ideas into practice, making them real in our everyday lives.
So how do we do that? How do we bridge that gap between head knowledge and heart transformation?
Well, Lewis throws out this idea that might seem a little surprising at first. He talks about pretending to be like Christ.
Pretending, like we're putting on a show.
Not exactly. It's more like we're practicing, rehearsing for a role. He compares it to those games kids play. They pretend to be adults, playing house, playing doctor, and in doing so, they develop the skills and understanding they'll need to become those things later on.
So it's about acting as if, even when we don't necessarily feel it or fully understand it, like faking it till you make it.
You could say that. Lewis argues that by pretending to have those Christian virtues, by acting as if we're already kind, compassionate, and forgiving, we actually start to become those things. It's about changing our actions first, trusting that our feelings and understanding will follow.
It's like we're training our hearts and minds to align with our actions, to embody those virtues more and more each day.
Precisely. And Lewis emphasizes that this pretending isn't about being fake or hypocritical. It's about consciously aligning our actions with our aspirations. It's about trusting that the experience of acting in a Christ-like way will gradually transform us from the inside out.
It's not about following a rigid set of rules. It's about becoming more like Christ himself, letting his characters shine through us in everything we do.
And he reminds us that Christ is actively involved in this process. He's not some distant figure from the past, but a living presence who's working in us and through us, guiding us toward wholeness and holiness.
That's amazing. It's like Lewis is giving us a whole new framework for understanding the Christian life. It's not about checking boxes or following rules. It's about becoming more like Christ, becoming a conduit of his love and grace in the world. And that's what true justice is all about, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's about reflecting the very heart of God in our actions, in the way we treat others, and in the way we strive to create a more just and compassionate world. And that's a journey worth taking, no matter how challenging it might be.
This has been incredible so far. We've explored the nature of justice, the role of faith, and the transformative power of grace. There's one more piece of the puzzle we need to explore. The ultimate goal of the Christian life. Union with God. And that's what we'll be diving into next time. So stay tuned. Well, here we are, the final part of our deep dive into mere Christianity and this whole idea of justice.
It's been quite a journey so far.
It has. And now we're talking about the ultimate goal of the Christian life.
Union with God.
Union with God. Wow. That sounds pretty intense.
It is intense. Lewis describes it as becoming so fully integrated with Christ that our individual selves kind of fade away.
Like we become part of something much bigger.
Exactly. Something much more glorious.
It's almost like losing yourself to find yourself.
You know, there's that saying, the seed must die to bear fruit.
That's a great analogy.
Lewis uses this powerful image of Christ cutting down the entire tree of our natural selves, not just pruning a branch here and there.
Okay, so no half measures.
No. He's saying that true transformation requires complete surrender.
A willingness to let go of everything we think we are.
That can be a scary thought.
It is. To think about letting go of everything that defines us, everything we cling to for security and identity.
It can feel that way, for sure. But Lewis argues that it's also the only path to true freedom.
Freedom from what?
Freedom from our own limited selves, from trying to find fulfillment in all the wrong places. He says trying to find ourselves apart from Christ will ultimately lead to emptiness.
And then we end up being manipulated by things outside of ourselves, right?
Exactly. Like, we become slaves to our own desires, our own limited perspectives, constantly trying to fill a void that only something much bigger can fill.
And that something bigger is Christ.
Right, who offers himself to us as a new self.
It's not about self-improvement then, but about self-transcendence.
Yes. It's about participating in that divine life, the Zoe life.
The life that flows from God himself. So it's not about becoming better versions of our old selves, but about becoming something entirely new, something that reflects the very nature of God.
Precisely. And Lewis emphasizes that this transformation isn't passive, it requires active participation.
What does that look like practically?
It means a willingness to surrender our wills to Christ.
Let him reshape us from the inside out.
Right. It's like we're handing over the reins of our lives.
Trusting that he knows the way better than we do.
That's it. And this surrender, this trust, it's not a one-time event.
It's an ongoing process.
It is a daily choice.
To align ourselves with Christ's will.
And allow his transforming power to work in and through us.
It's about those small, daily acts of obedience. Those moments when we choose to act out of love, even when it's difficult.
Exactly. Those seemingly insignificant choices that gradually shape our character.
And draw us closer to Christ and the fullness of life he offers.
You got it.
Lewis makes it sound so simple, yet so profound.
It is. It's about letting go of our self-centeredness.
And embracing a life centered on Christ.
And he reminds us that this life, this union with God, is the only true path to lasting fulfillment. Remember that powerful quote?
Oh yeah, which one?
Look for yourself, and you will find in the long run only hatred, loneliness, despair, rage, ruin, and decay. But look for Christ, and you will find him, and with him, everything else thrown in.
Oh, that's intense.
It is a powerful image.
It's a challenge to stop looking for fulfillment in all the wrong places, and to turn our attention to the one who offers everything we truly need.
And remember, this isn't about becoming mindless followers.
Blindly accepting everything we're told.
Right. It's an invitation to engage with truth, to wrestle with these ideas.
To allow our understanding to be stretched and transformed.
Exactly.
So it's about using our minds and our hearts to pursue a relationship with God, a relationship that will ultimately lead us to our true selves.
That's beautifully put.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive into C.S. Lewis and his perspective on the Christian life. I feel like he's given us a whole new way of thinking about justice, faith, and what it means to be truly human.
It's been a privilege exploring these ideas with you.
Likewise.
I hope this has inspired you to dig deeper into Lewis's work.
He has so much to offer, even if you don't consider yourself a Christian.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.